welcome to the Tuesday, January 21st meeting of the Brattleboro Select Board. We know the meeting has been properly warned because we came and entered into executive session at 5:30. You will also notice that we are four this evening. David is not with us. Okay, at this time I would entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes from January 7th.
So moved.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. I would like to take this opportunity from Hillary Francis to remind everybody that deadlines for petitions to be submitted for candidates to be on the ballot is Monday, January 27th by 5 p.m. And believe it or not, that is actually next Monday. We have burned through the entire month of January. So if you want to submit a petition to be on a ballot, you have to turn it in by next Monday, the 27th by 5 p.m. Peter, do you have any manager's comments?
I do, thank you. I have an announcement. I'd like to ask people who are watching on BCTV or online to pay particular attention to this because we have an unusual circumstance tonight where we're adding an item to be considered at the end of the agenda. It's a letter from the Select Board to Governor Scott regarding the Brattleboro retreat situation. And there are just some things that evolved in a way that it wasn't we didn't know last Friday when we warned the meeting that we would need to have this on this evening as part of this agenda. That's why it's coming up as a last-minute addition. I'm going to read the letter in its entirety now so that people watching will know what is going to be considered at the end of the meeting, and then it will be the final item of new business tonight. It's a letter to the Honorable Philip B. Scott, Governor of Vermont, regarding the Brattleboro retreat. Dear Governor Scott, thank you for announcing in your State of the State address that the Brattleboro retreat is simply too critical for us to let fail and that its closure would have a devastating impact on our mental health system and the region's economy. We completely agree. We are writing today in favor of a more robust state partnership with the retreat. This is an issue of central importance to our constituents in Brattleboro, to our neighbors throughout Windham County and Vermont who depend on the retreat for jobs and commerce, and most importantly, to the individuals and families who depend on the retreat to preserve and improve their very lives. The retreat has been an important institution in our community for almost 200 years. In the 21st century, the retreat has become an important institution for the whole state of Vermont. Partnering with other healthcare providers, social service agencies, law enforcement, and others, the retreat leverages its particular expertise in some of the most challenging aspects of our collective efforts to address mental illness and drug addiction. The retreat provides essential services to Vermonters suffering such acute mental health issues that many other hospitals turn them away. We are counting on you, your administration, the legislature, and the retreat's leadership to agree on a financial plan so that these essential services continue to be available and so that this major employer continues to be an important economic driver for our region. Sincerely, and it has the names and titles of all 5 board members. The board will consider this letter at the end of the meeting this evening, and if it's approved, it'll be signed tonight and transmitted tomorrow.
Thank you, Peter. It would be safe to say that by us considering this letter at the end of the meeting, it could give opportunity for anybody watching tonight who would like to come and speak about this letter to come and join us. We will take a break at 8:15. You'll have time to get here, I'm sure. Hopefully, if you want to speak up. Okay. Are there other members of the Select Board who have comments or committee reports or both this evening?
No, thank you.
I don't. We had a very productive traffic safety meeting recently, but I didn't bring my notes for what got accomplished, so I'm going to hold off on that and I'll let everyone know at a future meeting.
Okay, that sounds good. Daniel?
Yeah, I have a comment. I drove home in the snowstorm on Saturday. I'd been down to Amherst to spend my money there. That's not the story. The story is that, when I came back into town, I drove past the Public Works Department where everybody was mustering, and then throughout the afternoon and evening, I thought the snow removal for this particular snowstorm was really well managed, and by the next day, by mid-morning the next day, things were clear, and I just wanted to kind of like appreciate all the work that goes into that, because my wife, told me that she woke up a couple of times in the night and heard the plow go by, and maybe that's work that people don't see so much, and I just wanted to appreciate the staff for doing that.
Thank you very much, and I think you're right. And I noticed the sidewalks in front of my house were clear pretty quickly, I thought, on Green Street, so very appreciative of that. Okay. At this time, I will open the public participation section of our meeting. This is an opportunity for anybody who's here tonight from the public to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Nick? Mr. Nickerson?
I'm Nick Nickerson. From last 60 years, I've been living in Brattleboro. Along with two other Republicans, all I can find in Brattleboro, I would like to make a little what's better note to the select board. What's better from the Republican Party, and this came from the Wall Street Journal. Incomes are now rising faster for low-income workers than their bosses. That includes a 5.9% annual income increase for the bottom 10% of workers. So the capitalists are benefiting the proletariat, and Carl is spinning in his box. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Anybody else have?
Just a joke.
You can make a joke.
No.
Karl Marx.
Okay. All right, so seeing nobody else for public participation, we will move into becoming liquor commissioners. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I move that we become liquor commissioners.
Excellent. All those in favor? Aye. All right, and our first and only order of business, but don't let that sound like it's not exciting, is the special event permits for the Brattleboro Love Crawl, which is always a fun and very cool event.
Cards.
Ooh, lovely, thank you.
Thank you.
That's awesome,
The red
thank
light.
you.
And as they
Stephanie is handing out some cards to us so we can view the new graphic for the Love Crawl.
As they take the table, may I just announce
Please.
the usual for the record that this has been thoroughly reviewed by staff. It's now happened for several years. It's something that we know how it's going to impact the community, and that's in almost entirely wonderful ways. And so all of the review that's necessary in order to ensure that it can occur in a safe manner and it complies with town ordinances has been completed, and it's recommended for approval.
Thank you, Peter. All right. Hi, Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Bonin. I'm the Executive Director of Downtown Brattleboro Alliance. This is Elijah Cooper, who is working with me for 6 weeks, has 3 weeks under his belt, and is really a huge part of making this particular event happen, and then is also concentrating on making our Plan a Go-Go, our community calendar, really shine even more. So it's been a joy for me to be working alongside of someone every day.
Thanks, Elijah.
I do have 2 props with me tonight. How come this doesn't stay on?
That's like the test button on the inside.
So I handed you the new graphic this year for the Brat Love Crawl, and then this is an addition that's going to be out in front of each store so that it's more clear where the stops are, and then we can use them year after year. So I thought it would just benefit everyone to a little bit of background and then what the actual crawl is if you haven't been. So the background is that we all realized that the time after the holidays and in the thick of the winter that people like to hibernate, rightfully so, but we all kind of missed each other, and so we wanted to create an event that would bring people back out away from their homes into their community and have some fun for the night. We wanted people to go specifically into shops, and so we didn't want it to be a one spot type of an event, and that's how the crawl was born. So this year is our 5th year doing it. We are pairing 18 shops with 18 Vermont tastemakers, and there are 2 starting points. So people can either choose to purchase tickets, which are available right now online, or at Beadniks or Brattleboro Food Co-op for $8, or they can purchase the tickets the night of. The price does go up to $12 after February 2nd. And so they go to either of those two starting points. They come with their ticket or they purchase, they get ID'd, they get a stamp on the hand, and they get given this year a passport. And that passport shows them all of the pairings and also incentivizes going to an ample amount of them. Some examples of the pairings are, we have people that have done it every year, like Altiplano and Bar Hill. And I, as Cupid, I play Cupid in this event. I cannot separate those two. They will not let me. But other people have new pairings, like Vermont Vermouth will be at Renaissance Jewelry, a brand new company here in Brattleboro, Vermont Vermouth. And then also a fun one is Aqua Vitae is coming and going to be at Vermont Hempicurium.
Nice.
So 18 pairings, and that is the event.
That's awesome.
What does the ticket get you?
It gets you a taste at each of those pairings because each shop is paired with a Vermont tastemaker. So True North Granola is at George J. Brooks. So when you go in, you get a taste of that, then you leave, you come back out to the next stop.
Any other questions?
Yeah. I understand that we're here for the liquor commissioner role. I guess thinking about this in a kind of inclusive way, I forget why this happened, but I think it was maybe the BAPC put on an event with mocktail pairings, and it was, pretty well liked, I think. And I was wondering whether there could be in future years, non-alcoholic options beyond just like seltzer or what have you.
Yeah, this has come up before, and that event was great and was geared to mocktails, and they didn't have cocktails. And this event is geared towards distilleries and breweries and Vermont tastemakers. It does have food in it, so that there is sort of a balance in that way. I mean, any wine pairing, you have food because it also makes the wine taste. So my answer is not that we're not being inclusive, but more that we're being very specific to what this event is.
So there's 11 spirit companies and the remainder are food.
Yes, except for 2 current liquor licenses are being used, so it's actually 13 spirits, brewers, wineries, and those 2 liquor licenses that are being used are Peter Haven's private dining space, which is paired up with Dosa Kitchen, who will be opened, and then the lounge, which is paired up with no, it is a winery. It's going there. And then the rest are food. Grafton Cheddar, True North Granola, Elliott Street Fish and Chips, and Dosa Kitchen are all giving out food samples.
I had a quick question, just a curiosity. Oh, and I'll just say I think it's a great event.
Thanks.
I say that every year, but that's because I pretty much go every year.
Good.
I'm curious, what's the Aqua Vitae Afterglow at Vermont Hempicurium?
Yeah.
Is that a CBD thing?
I think that might be a misprint. I don't know what Afterglow is. So Aqua
It's the Aqua Vodka. That's the name of the company.
Afterglow is?
I think
Oh.
that might be part of the.
I just thought there might be a connection to the Hempicurium.
No, we intentionally did not put a CBD product there.
Yeah.
But it isn't. Aqua Vitae is a great short story, which is they brew kombucha, and in order
right,
for
that's
them,
what it is. Okay.
in order for them to be certified non-alcoholic, they have to distill all of their alcohol off. And so instead of throwing it away, they have recently started to distill it into actual vodka, and so now they have Aqua Vodka. So it's a byproduct of
That's
their
what I couldn't
kombucha.
figure out why.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for clearing that up, because that was confusing me, and now I realized it's Michael Butcher.
Yeah, because it sounded familiar.
Okay. Are there further questions or comments from members of the board?
I just have one kind of weird comment. Do you have to be 21 to plan an event like this?
No, you don't even have to be 21 to serve alcohol, which is odd.
Yep.
But no. But you do have to be 21 to attend the Love Crawl. No exceptions.
I guess the response I got to my question is sort of sitting with me uncomfortably. So I'm in a household where one person drinks and the other person doesn't, and we would love to engage with this event. And I would not really feel like I was,
Well,
I don't know, not so much not welcome, but like I wouldn't get as much out of it,
Yeah, you.
right? Like it wouldn't be as enjoyable for me.
if your partner's drinking a fancy-looking drink, you would
Yeah, and
also
I
drink
get
a fancy-looking
like,
drink.
you know, nothing.
So,
You know?
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And so I'm not saying like, you know, no liquor permit, but I think for future years, thinking about the message that that sends, you know, is something I'd like to see you guys think about. You know, there are a lot of people in this community who don't drink alcohol, who might have a partner or a significant other or, you know, friend that does, and they want to be able to go out too. And, you know, those people spend their money in our downtown.
Yeah, I don't want this to feel not included.
Right.
It's like I've never seen a Star Wars movie,
Right.
and I'm not part of any Star Wars.
Right, and I guess the way that I would feel included is if there was an option for me that beyond just a glass of water.
And I'd have to say I agree with Daniel on that.
I think I seem to remember that there's always a food option or some sort of snack at each one, and that doesn't mean that you think that it's a good value to pay the $8 in advance.
I'm sure the food is very tasty.
Yeah.
No, let me just clarify that there isn't a food option at each and every one.
Okay, but a couple of them are just food
Yes.
options.
Yeah, there are definitely food options. Yes.
Just so that was clear, because
Yeah.
all we're looking at and approving, of course, is the liquor options. But there are 2 or 3, just
4.
4, sorry,
Yeah.
non-liquor options. Just wanted to point that out.
I think he's saying he wants a fancy mocktail.
No, I get it. I totally get it to have the option side by side, for instance.
Yeah.
Which-
But I just wanted to remind everybody that what we're looking at is a complete list of just
Maybe there could be a
liquor items.
food-only ticket as well as the food and liquor ticket.
That's interesting.
Yep.
Yep.
I did.
Wasn't sure if there was a ticket. Okay. Are there members of the public who would like to talk about the Brattleboro Love Crawl liquor licenses? Yep. Okay. Hearing no more discussion, I would entertain a motion to approve the liquor license. Somebody was so inclined.
I'll make that motion to approve the issuance of the following special event permits for the Brattleboro Love Crawl event on Thursday, February 6th, 2020, from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. Just realized I'm in for a long haul here. That's okay. Caledonia Spirits at Altiplano, 42 Elliott Street. Saxton's River Distillery at Bee's Nest, 19 Elliott Street. American Crafted Spirits, doing business as Silo Distillery at Beadniks, 115 Main Street. Vermont Distillers, Inc. at Brattleboro Bicycle Shop, located at 165 Main Street. Wild Heart Distillery at Cara Wolf Jewelry Shop at 4 Elliott Street. Smuggler's Notch Distillery at In the Moment Records, 143 Main Street. White Mountain Distillery, doing business as Stowe Cider at Malison, 44 Harmony Place. Charles Dodge, DBA Putney Winery at Michelle Freezy. Frizzy.
Frizzy.
Frizzy. Okay, thank you. Michelle, I actually know Michelle, so I'm going to hear about that. Photography, 26 High Street. Vermont Vermouth at Renaissance Jewelry, 151 Main Street. St. Johnsbury Distillery at Taylor for Flowers, 15 Elliott Street. And Aqua Vitae Afterglow at Vermont Epicurean, 8 Flat Street.
All right, Tim. I fell asleep halfway through that. No, I'm just kidding. You did a very good job with that motion. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, guys.
Oh gosh, I need to pull this thing out. Let's do this to myself. All right. At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn as liquor commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. We now move into unfinished business. And surprise, surprise, our first item is the FY21 budget, which has been our unfinished business for approximately 15 years. Just kidding, 8 weeks. All right, our first item is pay adjustments for non-union employees. Cedars.
Thank you. So in the update, as we do each week in these final weeks of the budget process each year, page 1 of the memorandum that's in the backup and posted online actually provides a status of what has occurred to date. I won't go through that this evening because when you get to making your final decisions before this item wraps up, we'll go over the alternatives of where it leaves you in terms of the 2 decisions that you're going to be looking at tonight, and then those on top of all the decisions you've already made, what the overall impact is for the budget that'll go forward to town meeting. So I'm going to pass over the current status item and focus on the 2 decisions that you have in front of you for this evening.
Okay.
The first, as you pointed out, is pay equity for non-union employees. And for this, I'd like to set just a little bit of the context before I present the actual recommendation. This is a cycle with the collective bargaining units, the 4 employee unions, when we've invested a lot of attention and action on pay equity internal to those units, and as it relates, as the positions in those units relate to other employee positions in the town. And so with regard not just to the lower end of the pay scale, where $15 an hour is a measure that has emerged as being of great importance, and the board had indicated a desire to make sure that we didn't have any town employees paid less than $15 an hour for their service to the community. We looked at those things going through the collective bargaining process, but we also looked at the middle area and the upper portions of the pay scales to make sure, again, that there is fairness across the different departments and different functions of the town. We had earlier in this select board year, you have approved 3 of the 4 collective bargaining agreements, mostly last summer. That happened. And the 4th one is on this agenda for action later this evening. In the actions that were taken there, as we were proceeding, particularly through the earlier 3, it became apparent that we needed to give a similar level of attention to non-union positions in the town, because that wasn't going to happen as a natural course of just sitting down to bargain for a new 3-year agreement as it was happening with the collective bargaining units. And so around the May or June timeframe, we began looking at that question. It emerged over the course of the summer that a couple of different groups of employees came to me and expressed concern about their compensation. They are 2 different groups of non-union employees, and they wanted to make sure that they understood how we were looking into this matter and what our intentions were about how to finalize the review and bring it forward. And so there's been a lot of communication on that. There was one evening back in August when one of those 2 groups of employees actually came and addressed the select board and wrote a letter to the editor. So there's been a little bit of public consideration of this, but mostly it's been work that has gone on intensely behind the scenes as we obtained some consultant assistance to make sure that we were assessing this in a proper, objective manner. And then worked first with the senior staff and then with the broader group of affected employees to make sure that we had calibrated the recommendation appropriately to achieve the greater level of equity that we were seeking. The impact of that is attached to the backup materials this evening. So behind the memorandum regarding the budget is a 2-page attachment. On the top of page 1, it says proposed annual salaries and salary ranges for full-time non-union town employees. It then lists each position of salaried non-union employees. And you'll note that there's 4 numbers next to each one. That's because what we're creating is a pay system where instead of just a pinpoint, a single point that is the salary currently paid for that position that doesn't exist within a broader salary structure for town government, that instead, similar to the 3 of the 4 collective bargaining agreements, we're establishing pay ranges for positions. So the bottom number in each case is the entry-level salary for that position, and the top number is the top-out salary, or the top of the range for that position. And one of the reasons why salary structures typically include pay ranges rather than just a single point salary is so that you can create equity in situations where you might have a more senior employee in a position that is roughly equivalent to a position where there's a more junior employee or someone being appointed into a position as a new employee in that rank, so that they aren't on day 1 of the new employee's service, and years into the other person's service, they're not being paid the exact same amount. To differentiate them means to leave them differentiated into the future. To pay them the same isn't equitable on day 1. And so we use pay ranges so that we can provide a relationship between one position and another that allows for those changes over time, so that 2 new people will be proportional to the size and responsibility of their position, and 2 senior people will be also in that same proportion, but it allows for those fluctuations as employee tenure changes. So that's why you see pay ranges proposed for every employee. Up until now, only the DPW supervisors and the park supervisor within this group of employees affected by this actually had pay ranges. They were already in ranges that had 4 steps to them, and now every non-union employee, whether a salaried employee or a hourly employee, will be in a pay range. At the bottom half of page 2 of this attachment to the memorandum, there's a header: proposed hourly rates and pay ranges for part-time non-union town employees. And so here you see 2 separate groupings of employees with 2 separate pay ranges that are shown as hourly rates for the 4 separate steps, rather than as annual salary for the 4 separate steps. And the reason for that is because the part-time employees work a variety of different schedules. And so annualizing their pay would have led to very much an apples, oranges, and bananas kind of comparison. The way to keep it calibrated so that we could ensure fairness between the 2 sets of jobs that are represented here is to report those ranges as hourly ranges. The overall cost impact to approve town-wide what is recommended in these 2 pages for the remainder, my recommendation is that you approve this evening and that it be implemented with the first payroll in February, and that for the remaining 5 months of this fiscal year, the cost impact of the salaries and the FICA and VEMRS being the retirement system, the Vermont Municipal Employee Retirement System. So the town's contribution on behalf of employees and the FICA taxes that the town pays on behalf of employees, along with the salary adjustments, the total cost impact for all of the non-union employees for the remainder of FY20 is $24,000. The total impact for FY21 is $82,000. The 82, in order to determine the impact upon the budget that we're working on, the 82 needs to be adjusted 2 different ways. The first is that some of these employees' positions are funded through the utility budget rather than through the general fund operating budget. So $15,000 of the FY21 costs. I should say first, just noting for the record, that the FY20 costs, because we're more than halfway through FY20, those would be unbudgeted expenses of approximately $24,000. Something just less than 20 of that would be in the general fund. As we've talked often, at an expense of that magnitude, so long as we're managing the overall scope of the revenues and the expenditures in the general fund budget over the course of the year, as long as we're doing that overall job well, an expense of this magnitude can be, we can absorb an expense of this magnitude because there are always going to be some line items that are over and some line items that are under. So we'll manage for this expense as we complete this budget year. And then it's important that since we're 6 months away from the beginning of the next budget year and still finalizing FY21, it's important that we reflect that impact in the budget that you'll be recommending to representative town meeting. So on that one, back to the math, $15,000 that'll be in the utility fund budget comes off of the 82. And those are rounded figures. The exact figure of what we need in the general fund to fund these changes is $66,875. You'll recall that earlier in this budget process, actually at the beginning of this budget process, when I proposed staff's FY21 budget for your review, we had a $30,000 placeholder. At that time, we were still pretty early in the detailed work around this. We had done a lot of conceptual work around it. We had kind of set the framework within which we would conduct this review, but we weren't very far along in actually calculating what the changes might be. And so I missed it. I underestimated significantly, so I apologize for that. But the placeholder that we put into the budget that we brought you is $30,000. We need $66,875, and that's why the impact of the decision that we're recommending this evening would add $36,875 to the proposed FY21 budget.
Excellent. That was very thorough, and I have to say thank you so much for the very smart way that you have created these ranges within each position. I'm not even going to guess how much work was put into that. So thank you very much. Are members of the board have questions or comments about our pay equity for non-union employees?
Yeah, I would just say in addition to, paying people fairly, I really do appreciate the clarity of laying it out and kind of having a structure that's a little more formalized. And I think that's super valuable just for our employees and all of our taxpayers to just have it laid out very transparent.
We're going to benefit from that for a long time to come, just having it done.
Yeah.
I also appreciate this work, and I note that the whole year's work has been with 3 unions and then this non-union group. And in each case, and in all cases, the goal has been fairness. And I think that that's been achieved, and I'm very appreciative of it.
Daniel, you want to add anything?
I'm really happy that we've done this work, and I'm glad that staff felt that they work in an organization where they can bring some of this stuff to management, and management will consider it. And I think that the work that went into this, and I'm presuming that our HR director had a fairly large role
Absolutely.
in this as well. So I'm glad
Yes.
that we have a HR director. And I'm excited that we're going to be able to retain experienced staff who contribute a great deal of value to the town, and that this will be a good place to work for them, and they will spend their wages locally, and our economy will be all the better for that. So good.
Is there anybody here tonight that came to speak on the topic of pay equity for non-union employees? Okay. So,
Maybe
Yeah,
people
did you
came
speak for that
without
Yes,
that
please.
intention, but they
Yeah.
want to speak anyway.
and they might want to speak anyway. Throwing out the curveballs.
Look, we got somebody.
Yeah, Star took the bait.
I did. I just want to thank the town staff and the select board and everyone who's worked on this, and it means the world to our employees to know that they are valued. And I always say the best and most important resource we have at the library is our staff, and so it's wonderful to see this kind of support and reinforcement. Thanks.
Well, thank you. You're on a good team. Okay. Would I be entertaining a motion?
Yes, please.
For that specific, okay, I would entertain a motion.
I move.
Oh,
It
Go ahead.
loads up. To approve the town manager's recommended compensation system and pay adjustments for non-union employees.
excellent. Daniel has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion
you.
carries. Thank you, Peter.
The second decision for you this evening related to the FY21 budget is the follow-along to last week's discussion about the swimming pool. So you'll recall that earlier, weeks ago in the budget process, we were asked about the cost to replace the pool house. And we brought that information to last week's meeting. There are a few different options for how that might be done. And the current cost estimates for those range from $475,000 to $760,000. You had some discussion about that. And then moved pretty quickly into the broader context within which that decision would be made related to the overall pool facility. After extended discussion around that, the direction from the board was for staff to bring back a cost estimate, a proper budgetary figure for what it would take to do a conceptual plan and a budgetary cost estimate for replacement of the entire pool facility, rather than just the consideration to put into the capital budget potentially the additional funding for the pool house, but rather with an eye towards what we expect will be a recommended bond for needed improvements at the Living Memorial Park and at the Public Works facilities in FY23, 2 years from now, where we have elsewhere in the budget funding to do the engineering work that's needed for the two other components at Memorial Park. And last year, the same kind of engineering money was funded for the work that needs to be done in the planning process for DPW. And so that work will be completed over the next year. And a year from now, the select board will be looking at how to frame the work necessary to get ready for a potential bond issue the following year. So it's basically a 2-year process of planning, deciding how to proceed, preparing to proceed, and then being ready to recommend a bond to town meeting. If the full swimming pool replacement or major component replacement in the context of a long-term plan is to be included within that FY23 bond, then we estimate $30,000 as what will be necessary to perform the engineering conceptual planning work for that project to come along at the same schedule as the other two components at Memorial Park and the Public Works facilities. And so the question before you this evening is whether or not to add $30,000 to the transfer to the capital projects, the capital projects transfer from the general fund to the capital fund, whether to add $30,000 to that line item of the FY21 budget to fund engineering work in preparation for scoping a possible full pool replacement.
Thank you, Peter. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming when we talk about updating police, moving police stations and fire stations and public works and things at our parks. But I think it's important, it's important for us to remember that we live in an aging town, and that's just going to be what happens. These aren't like our homes where 4 people go in and out of it, and maybe we can fix things here and there. These are heavily used buildings that carry a lot of liability for the humans that come in and out of them. And it's important to look at them differently than you would how you update your old house. Are there any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Liz?
I particularly like the way that this budget item is framed. We're talking about this now, right?
Sure. So would you like me to explain that to the public?
Yes, I would, because I think it influences our decision.
Sure. So what Liz is describing, for the benefit of those who may not have looked at this online or have it in front of them at home, is at the bottom of the second page of a 2-page memo. So the first page was that summary that I alluded to earlier. The top of the second page is the specific information about the 2 questions for tonight's decision making. And then the board has an important final decision to make regarding the overall FY21 budget that you will recommend for town meeting consideration. And so because staff couldn't predict where you would necessarily land this evening on the two pending questions, we presented 4 alternatives kind of as a menu. The first one we know is no longer relevant. That was the net impact of all prior changes only, with nothing else added tonight. You've made the decision to add the non-union pay increases. Thank you for that. And so number 1 and actually number 3 also are no longer relevant to your decision making. Number 3 being the net impact of all prior changes and the swimming pool engineering, but without the pay raises. So what remains in terms of the summary of the impacts, and we present it this way when you get to making your final decision so that it can be really clear to you of how what you're doing tonight relates to what you've done earlier in this process, and then how the two together are the impact to bring forward to the public. And so if you were to not approve the $30,000 to do the engineering for the pool, the place where this budget would land in terms of impact on municipal property taxes would be a 2.9% increase, a 3.77 cents increase, which equates to $37.70 per $100,000 of property value as an increase on the annual tax bill. And then if you did decide to add the $30,000 for the engineering for the pool, then option 4 would be where you'd land. And that would result in a 3.1% or 4.03 cents increase in the municipal property tax rate, which equates to $40.30 of additional taxes per $100,000 of property value.
So, back to, I wish you would. Okay, so here it all is laid out for us, and it's very interesting because last year's budget, although I wasn't on the select board last year, I was on the finance committee and at town meeting. And the goal of the select board, and which ultimately became the goal of town meeting, was to advance the 1% in order to keep the tax rate low for the middle class, for this vitality of the town, to keep that priority uppermost in our minds. And so this year, it's from the big picture, what we're looking at is, these employee negotiations, and they're multi-year negotiations with 3 unions and 1 not union. So it seems to me that that's been the organized thrust of all our work. And then it boils down to, it's funny that it boils down to either item 2 or item 4. And when you look at item 2 and item 4, to keeping it in context of the fact that last year we did not have a tax increase because of the 1%. So now we're, with these 2 things, we're looking at a pretty large tax increase with the pool. And it's interesting to me that just this one thing is kind of tipping us over the scale of reasonableness. And so I'm voting to support the pool design next year so that we can maintain our goal of having a reasonable tax rate, and understand that the organization of this year's budget was for employee salaries, and next year we can be moving on to more capital planning for our recreation and infrastructure.
Do you think that would work, doing the engineering next year and then still trying to fit it in for, I just lost the year, FY23. Thank you.
It would not be in the same time frame as the bond projects. I would say, I'm choosing my words carefully because the pool is a very worthy project. You had a lot of conversation about it last week. You heard from Carol eloquently speaking about what the pool represents to some folks in our community who don't have the resources necessarily for other forms of recreation or vacations. And so we all recognize that. Preserving the pool as an important part of our recreational facilities and programming is essential. Staff didn't recommend this. Staff has produced the information you've asked us to produce. And the reason we didn't recommend it, we mentioned this last week, and so I'll reiterate it tonight, is we see the ultimate replacement of the swimming pool as something that will be important and necessary in the years to come, but is not urgently needed right now. We've invested hundreds of thousands of dollars at the pool in the last couple of years to address a leakage issue and to safe up the pool deck. And so it is staff's perspective that this kind of a long-term planning effort is entirely appropriate and something we should undertake as a community, but it frankly wouldn't even need to be next year, but just, sort of sometime in the relatively near future that we could do the planning so that in the mid to long-term future, we're addressing the need. And the reason we feel that way is because of the magnitude of what the gotta-dos look like, both at Living Memorial Park and for the operation of the Public Works Department. And so what we brought to you earlier in this process as our recommendation was fund the engineering necessary to address the things that absolutely have to be done. The deficiencies at the rink that are going to cause the rink to close if we don't address them. And to address the deficiencies at Public Works that make it not a sufficiently safe facility because of improvements that need to be made to a facility that hasn't much been upgraded since literally about the 1950s or 60s. So those are the things we think we need to be focused on as necessary in the bond for FY23. And we see the pool as being something really beneficial for the community, really important for us to look ahead at and plan for ultimate replacement in a way that'll serve the next few generations of folks here in Brattleboro, but not something that needs to be on this same time frame for the FY23 bond.
And we're not looking at the pool closing. If we
exactly
don't
right.
make this decision tonight, we're not putting our community members who spend our few brief weeks of summertime at that pool every day at risk.
That's exactly right. In fact, summer of 20 would look a lot like summer of 19. 2020 would look a lot like 2019 at Memorial Park at the pool.
Daniel?
So just to kind of make sure I understand this right, so the potential bond issue, what was it, in 2023 is substantial and is addressing things that need to be addressed, right? Because they're like mission critical things. If that bond is, passed, how much longer would we be looking out from 2023 before we were able to take on a project like renovating the swimming pool to make it a beautiful, shining star in our town?
So the timing of the 2023, the reason we're targeting 2023 as the timing for that bond is it coincides with when some prior debt is falling off the budget. It's a particularly advantageous time to add new debt because the full impact of that new debt will not be felt by the taxpayers. It'll be a while before that happens again. But the swimming pool is also a candidate, we think, for, with enough advance notice for some grant funds, for some community fundraising. There's ways in which we could go about that project over a period of years to be ready then to construct it, when it needs to be constructed. And so it's a bit of a wishy-washy answer because frankly, I think the fair answer in terms of creating reasonable expectations is we're not talking about just a year or two after FY23, right, which means we're talking sort of a decade out from now, but where the planning could be going on over the next few years in a way that positions us to then have several years of getting ready to do it. And then we'd be in a position to do it somewhere in the time frame that's kind of a decade or so out.
Yeah. that's kind of an exciting idea for me, that we could potentially a decade from now have a facility that is for everybody and maybe could include year-round use. We're not very well served for indoor pools for people without a whole bunch of money. I know community members that go all the way to the Y in Keene, and instead of that money leaving our town, we could keep it here. But I don't think that now is the right time to be planning for something of that scale.
If I might, Carol's here, and I want to make sure, as I answer boldly and
like that too.
specifically, that,
Thank
that
you.
I know that we're generally on the same page. If there's something specific that you think needs to be added, please speak up.
So for the most part, I think we're right on target. There are a couple of little items that we may have to invest in along the way, per se. There's no safety issues that we have to say, hey, we need, we're not gonna open in 2022, 2023, though that's not the situation. But I think, you might have to invest in some more patching at the pool, It's still a 1957 pool. We slowed down the leak and then stopped the leak. I mean, I would be totally dismissive if I wasn't being totally upfront with you that, the stopper is not holding it all back. There is still some leakage. So we may have to invest in some, continue the Band-Aid, if you hear what I'm saying. Certainly we're gonna need to do maybe some spruce up in the locker room, tiling, rubber flooring, to buy us those 10 years. If we're talking a decade out here, we may have to do some of those things. Not this summer, but something we do need to be totally upfront about, just those type of little things that can buy us the amount of time that we do need, just being totally upfront.
Thank you.
Does that fit in? Oh, go ahead, Tim.
Well, I actually have to jump in. I don't think 10 years should be a goal. I think sooner than 10 years should be a goal. And I know I might be unrealistic, but I think it's an important resource for our community. It's already an incredibly important resource to so many community members. And it doesn't feel that necessary to really go on about it, but I did start to become concerned about the absolutely needed bond items becoming sort of an everything bond, and getting out of control. And the 30K expenditure sounds easy and makes sense until I started to think about it a little more, and I started to realize that I still, as I mentioned last meeting, I don't have a really good read on what our community wants, and I don't think we should even spend $30,000 on, conceptual plans before we know that we all want this and we're willing to take that leap, and with the added plan of maybe bringing in some partners and some donations and making it more of a community push outside of the taxpayer expenditure. So, but I just wanted to stick that in there, that I'm not sure it should be like, we're definitely going to do this in 10 years, because that feels too far away from me. But what I do want to commit to is this board, or whatever future board makeup we have when it gets warmer. Someday it will get warmer, right, Carol?
It will.
I know.
It always does.
It's hard to remember sometimes in January, to go out for a site visit and to really start that conversation about, hey, why are they out here? Well, it's because we want to start a community conversation about how to go about this in a sensible way. So.
Brandy, one more thing. I wouldn't want to gloss over a little item that Peter said, which is fundraising, and I happen to know that Carol's very good at that. So to be planning that at the same time would be great.
When you hear Carol say things like, we're going to need patches and this and that along the way, does that feel like something that you're confident bringing to future boards, whatever
Absolutely.
makeup those are, and standing behind those?
Absolutely.
And I'm still laser focused on the skateboard park, so I think we all,
Oh yeah, that topic's been opened back up.
sure,
Uh-huh.
good, let's keep it open and keep hammering away.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping that we'll be going out very soon out to bid. I've got a pretty good sized meeting later this week that will be tidying some things up to, I'll get that RFP out.
I know you've
Thank you.
been, a lot of people have been working hard on it, so thank you very much.
All right.
Thanks, Carol.
Everybody feel like they know what they need to know at this moment?
Yep.
Okay. Is there anybody in the room that is not sitting at this table that would like to make any comments before we formalize our motion for the Live-In Memorial Park swim pool renovation or replacement item? Okay.
May
Yeah.
I? In the absence of direction to add this item,
Yeah.
it simply won't get added.
Oh,
So
okay. We don't have
I
to
think
formalize.
that's where you're
Doesn't need a
landing,
motion.
and if
Yeah,
it is
all
where
right,
you're
Carol.
landing, we can move along to just, I should summarize, I think, one more time where this leaves
Okay.
the overall budget,
Okay.
and see if you're comfortable that we're ready for us to finalize everything and bring it to you next week, so you can look at the 18 pages of it and say, yep, that's our budget.
Sounds
Okay.
perfect.
So of the four options at the bottom of the second page of the cover memorandum for today, you have, the decisions you've made land you at option 2. That's the net impact of all prior changes and the non-union pay increases, which is an increase of $59,014 in property taxes above and beyond the budget that has been out on the internet now for almost 3 months, the staff's proposed budget from the first week of November. So for the benefit of the public who may want to look at this before next Friday when we put out the updated proposed budget, it is that budget which is out on the internet right now, plus $59,014. And the component pieces of that, those increases, there's 4 things that are causing the increases. One is the response, the board's positive response to the Human Services Review Committee of Representative Town Meeting, which requested that the allocation of funding for human services be increased by $4,510. The second is your positive response to the Chamber of Commerce and the Downtown Brattleboro Alliance for the request that the Community Marketing Initiative funding always represent 10% of the prior year's receipts on the rooms and meals tax. We had, as staff, in our proposed budget to you, shown it as a flat number based on last year's $42,119 allocated to this funding. The request was to let that be a number that floats with the actual receipts. You approved that at least for this year and as general guidance to the staff going forward. And so this year's impact is $1,629 additional dollars. And you also approved last week funding for Project Care of $16,000 to fund transportation services and the recovery coach services. This evening, you've approved $36,875 additional dollars of funding for the non-union employee pay adjustments. And the total of those 4 items is $59,014. That total impact of the recommended adjustment then to the recommended FY21 budget as compared to the FY20 budget that was adopted at Representative Town Meeting last year, this would be a 2.9% increase in the municipal property tax rate, a 3.77 cents increase in the municipal property tax rate, which equates to $37.70 increase in the annual tax bill per $100,000 of property value. And you don't need to take a motion on that tonight, but if that summary lands you in the place that you thought you were landing, I just need to know that you're ready without any further ado for us to bring you the budget for you to approve as your proposed budget for town meeting.
Thank you, Peter. People sitting at this table?
So,
Yeah?
I'm in.
feel good.
Timothy?
I want to just point out something. That in the past, this board has dipped into fund balance to ameliorate some of the effects on our taxpayers. I'd like to say that I'm not in favor of doing that, partly because of, Franz, you brought up some interesting data the other day. Sorry I had to call you out. It was supposed to be a compliment. But concern about towns maintaining fund balance is a good one. And it seems under the recommended level of reserve funds that a town should have to be wise in today's world. So I'm not advocating for doing that this year, as we have in the past. But I am hoping that everyone does realize that there is some good news. Someone mentioned the 1% local option tax. So what looks to be very good news is coming down the pike, hopefully. And I'm to the tune of, so people don't have numbers in front of them like we do, but we have budgeted as income $630,000 for our 1% local option tax. Our first quarter report is something in the neighborhood of $211,000. So, and there is some reason to believe that that's average or possibly even low for a quarter, because it doesn't reflect the strongest quarter traditionally as far as sales tax. So we're looking at possibly in the neighborhood of $200,000 more in revenue to offset taxpayer burden. So I think this is a good thing. I'm not proposing anything here, but I want what Liz said earlier about the mission of the 1% local option tax to be held close to our hearts as we go forward into town meeting, because I really hope that people will hang on to that, not feel super rich, and use it to, to think that our increase is hopefully not as bad as it looks on paper currently. So I'm not making a proposal, but I just wanted to throw that out there that that's a positive thing.
It's real money.
And as much as I would love to see our general fund operations flatline or go down a little bit as it did last year, it doesn't look like that can happen. We've invested a lot in our community and our people, and I think that's the most important thing to invest in. But it certainly played into my thoughts on pool houses and studies and things like that. So,
Thanks, Tim.
thanks.
Franz?
Franz Reichsman, Finance Committee. Based on Selectwoman McLaughlin's remarks last week, in which she seemed to think at times perhaps I get a little bit verbose, I'm going to refrain from relating the story
I
that
can't
I might
imagine that I would say
otherwise
He's
have
gonna pull
told.
it
However, I will bring up a substantive point, and I just want to make sure that the additional separate articles that'll be warned have budgetary implications. And it seems like most of them, but I want to know if all of them are included in the budget estimates that you just gave.
Yes,
Thank you.
they are,
Good question.
with one exception, which is the SEVEDS funding that doesn't appear in the general fund budget. That would be, if it's approved, if that article is approved, that funding would come from program income. But each of the others is a general fund expense and is reflected already in the general fund budget.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question, Franz. All right, Peter, what do you need from us? Something formal or general nods?
No, this is, again, a moment where if you don't direct any further changes, what we're going to bring to you for next Tuesday night is the budget with the changes that I itemized earlier that you've previously directed. It'll all be in there so that you can look at it and, as I said, sort of say, yes, this is our budget. We're ready to send it to representative town meeting. We'll have that, and then in the follow-up to the discussion you're going to have later this evening about the warnings, the same thing will be true of next week's meeting. We'll have the warnings in front of you in a form where we expect that it'll be just looking at it and saying, yes, that's our warning. We're ready to issue it.
Well, great. So it looks like for the budget item, we are doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are now moving into new business.
Yes.
And our first item of new business is the monthly financial report for December. Peter?
I'm happy to report that things are in solid shape. We are halfway through the fiscal year. This is the report through December 31st. So the first 6 months of the fiscal year. And the prorated total expenditures, and why I say prorated is because there's those couple of very large expenses that are incurred early in the year, and then those get prorated out over the 12 months so that we can see actually what our spending rate looks like. The prorated general fund expenditures are at 48.6%. And then the same with the utilities fund, the prorated utilities fund expenditures are at 49.3%. Through the first 6 months of the year. Revenues also are in good shape in both areas, and the parking fund expenditures are at 48%, 48.4%. So solid all the way around. We have the information as usual about the solid waste disposal fund. Those revenues and expenditures lag, so we're always a little behind. But we're in good shape where the revenues are exceeding the expenditures at 45.4 and 44.2. And the loan report shows that we have $4,193,297 of outstanding loans. All of them are current except for one loan that is in default and fully reserved. And then there's the continuing note about the cultural intrigue balance that will not be recovered, that we've been just carrying as a book entry. The program income report shows that we have $499,025 available funds for additional grants and loans as of December 31st. You have recently approved one additional loan and the recommendation that you're making to representative town meeting for the SEVEDS funding. So in the next few months, this number will come down, but 499 is a above average figure. We often run in the $200,000 to $300,000 range. We like it when there's a bit more in there because it gives us some flexibility for additional grants and loans. So, drawing down off of this from 499 down to something closer to $400,000 is still solid position for that fund. We have 41 active grants that we're administering and 4 grants where we are in the application cycle to potentially receive some more of other people's money.
Thank you, Peter, and thanks to John Connor for putting this together. Okay.
You're going to ask if we have any questions?
I was just getting to that.
Oh, okay. I thought you were
I
going
said,
right.
This was me. Quit, and then
I thought Daniel might not have an opportunity to ask a
I just
question.
turned the page. Does
I
anybody
know.
have any questions?
Do you have a question?
I do. It's
Go ahead.
probably easy,
Yeah.
but it's top of mind.
Yeah.
I noticed that Public Works traffic light
Yes.
is a little high in the expenditures for contractual repairs and parts.
Yeah.
Would you like to take this opportunity to say anything
and
about our
going up.
traffic?
About that light?
So yes, the lights
got
on
people-
Flash at High Street
Yes.
and Main Street are the result of someone hitting the pole there and knocking out the controller. Unfortunately, it happens from time to time, and usually we're able to repair it quicker than has been true this time. We're waiting on a part that we thought we would have already had, and we'd be back on cycle. So I don't have an up-to-the-minute update of how many more days we think we're going to be on Flash, but I know that we had expected to actually get it restored before the weekend. We're still waiting on the part. As soon as the part comes in, it'll be a high priority to get that repaired.
Forgive me for being semi-flippant here, but is there any way to buy 2 of everything that thing has?
Let me check on
Yeah,
that.
but Tim wouldn't like it when the budget comes.
I know, but
That's actually.
but really, it's. I hear a lot that
It's a
people,
good
it really
question.
impacts people's.
Oh, I crossed the street there
Quality
last
of life.
night, and it was.
We have some
I ran the
nods.
gauntlet.
It's a good question.
It's a good exercise in cooperation and community spirit,
It certainly is.
but not everyone is on the same page with that.
Right. No, it creates a difficult situation, particularly for pedestrians, but also for people entering into Main Street from the side streets. And
It's awful.
it's a really good question as to, what would it take for us to actually store some spare parts? I think it's a more complicated question than just, hey,
Oh, I'm sure.
Can we get 2 of that thing next time? Because it's not always the same thing
Sure.
that gets damaged. But it's a question that we'll pursue to see whether or not we can be a little more resilient about these situations.
That's why I said semi.
Thank you. Yeah, no
Running
problem.
across that street
Thank you.
after dark last night was super exciting for me. Okay, are there other questions or comments regarding the financial report prepared by John O'Connor and delivered by Peter Elwell this evening? Okay. Do I need a motion for this? Yeah. Perfect, just letting you finish writing. Okay, so our second item is a visit, presentation, discussion with Southeast Vermont Transit, also known as SEVT. If you would like to come up and join us at our side table and give yourself and your company you represent a good introduction.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My name is Randy Shoemaker. I'm the CEO of Southeast Vermont Transit, and Southeast Vermont Transit is made up of the mover in Wilmington and the current based in Rockingham. And we merged those 2 companies in 2015, and we have been merging ever since, but it was the current division of our company that runs the Brattleboro service, formerly known as the B Line, has been for many years, and so we have merged, and now we are one company. We don't play the SEVT card a lot, but we're mostly known as the mover and the current. And so I've been lucky enough to come in front of the Brattleboro board most every year. I think I've skipped maybe 1 year in the past 5 or 6 to brief you on where we're at and what's going on in your town's transit system. And I prepared a handout I'm sure that Jan has circulated to you, and I don't think I need to read it to you, but I would like to highlight some of the things that are happening with the transit system in town. You might remember that we operate the red, white, and blue lines. We operate also demand response service for seniors and people with disabilities. Demand response is you call and make a request for a ride, and we come by and pick you up, usually on a door-to-door or curb-to-curb basis. Brattleboro is a municipality, so we have ADA paratransit service. And we deliver rides by a number of different sources, and you may see a car go by with a magnet on the side that says current, but we do have 15 very active volunteer drivers, and they're providing a tremendous amount of service in addition to the buses that you see rumbling around town. Really a noble cause and a noble group of people that we're lucky to work with. Since I think 4 years ago, we have been renting a small office in the transportation center. It started out as $100 a month. I think we're up to $108 with inflationary changes. We have a signed contract with you until 2023. And it's a place for our drivers to maintain supplies and for us to just do very basic support functions. It's not really an office or a dispatch center or what have you. We do store 6 buses up at Tarmies, and we really do need a facility in town. We need a bus wash, we need a fueling station. We need to see if we can get our buses indoors at some point. We've identified the needs to our chief funding agency, which is the Ron Agency of Transportation, and capital funds are, like every other fund, tough to get at, but we're in line, so to speak, and in the absence of earmarks, which the state enjoyed a real plethora of, we need to continue to plan and wait. We did meet with DPW a few months ago about any possible shared facilities we could have if that project ever moves forward, and we would revisit that again before we did any land purchase or lease or anything of that nature. So needs to be done. But what is exciting is what we did the past 18 months. I'm jumping down to the new schedule. In the middle of the handout, you can see the hours, rides, and miles, which are the benchmarks for transit that we do in Brattleboro by red line, white line, and blue line. For our last fiscal year, we gave 57,000 rides in Brattleboro, and at a cost of about $670,000. You can see our local funding. And basically what happens in transit is the goal is to have 80% federal and 20% local. And 20% of your funding could be state, may match half of that in some cases, and in some cases they don't. But you can see in Brattleboro by the local funding amount, the town has given us $50,000 for, 8 or 9 years maybe, Patrick, even longer?
That's about right, I think.
Yeah. You would know, you've been here. But we get $15,000 from the town of Hinsdale. We run the Blue Line there. That was a grant that we received a few years ago. And then we collect fares. We have $1 fare per ride. And we've always maintained that fare. I think the riders in town support the bus system. I've talked to previous select boards who wanted to see or to keep the community engaged and demonstrate their support in terms of fares. So we don't hear of people being turned away or I can't afford it. It seems to work out well. And it's a substantial amount of money. But the exciting part that I wanted to talk about briefly was we needed to change the schedule, which was done back in 2014 by a consultant from Colorado. And things got really out of whack between the three lines. And we spent 18 months talking to people, focus groups, surveys, public input, outreach. We brought a consultant in. The state helped us with a lot of support. And we ended up taking a lot of money from, a lot of hours, I should say, from the blue line, and we put it into the white line. And then we took the red line, which basically starts in West Brattleboro, the residential part of our system, and it goes through the transportation center and then back out to Market 32. And that used to be a 2-seat ride. You used to have to get off at the transportation center and get on another bus to go out to Market 32. When we redesigned the route, that is now 1 seat. You don't have to transfer. So we made a lot of changes based on suggestions, and ridership increased 13%. So the graph that you see at the bottom will show you that a 13% increase from October to October is really, really substantial. Most transit in the United States right now is lucky to break even with the previous year, and Brattleboro's enjoying 13% more rides. So we're pleased with the support that we have there. And just a note of explanation on the graph, you can see two numbers for 2018 and 19. One is 60,504 rides, the other is 64,815. The higher number of 64,18 is what those rides would have been if we had counted them the same as the previous year. That two-seat ride I mentioned from West Brattleboro to Market 32. If we had counted apples to apples, we would have been at almost 65,000 rides. So far so good with that. And again, we had a lot of support from the town and a lot of input. The only other thing that we did substantially different last year was we introduced a transit app. The Mover in Wilmington had been the beta site for Vermont for testing an app on your phone to say, where's my bus? When will it be here? And we ironed out a lot of bugs in our neck of the woods over that time period. And then eventually the state went out to bid with it on an open source platform. And several different apps now use the technology. And Brattleboro was implemented late summer as a kind of a soft opening. And we're still working out some kinks here, but this software is really, really good. You can set your phone to tell you when the bus is arriving. It'll give you an alert that if you have to walk to the bus, you better start walking now. It'll help you plan your trips. It will show you physically where the bus is. So a lot of good things. And in Brattleboro, we thought in particular it would be very helpful because of the nature of the rides, the transfers, et cetera, et cetera. So we're excited to bring technology to our little bus system. Any questions about our overview? Yep.
I have two things I want to talk to you about. I'm a big supporter of buses, and I think your ridership could be significantly increased if everybody talked about and promoted the sustainability aspects of taking the bus. Most people, I think, take the bus because they don't have a car. But there's a whole world of people who could take the bus if they realized that public transportation was advantageous to combat climate change. And the other interesting development in Brattleboro that you may not be aware of is that we have a new sustainability coordinator coming in 2 weeks. And I would think it would be a great idea for your company to increase ridership if you worked with the new sustainability coordinator to promote bus ridership as a sustainability action. And the other thing that I think is really necessary that we've talked about in our goals all year is bus signs. Because I don't have, ESP to tell me where the bus is coming. Occasionally I see people standing on the street corner and wonder, oh, they're taking the bus. But there's no sign. And if there were signs, and if those signs talked about your app, that sounds like a wonderful idea, then people could take the bus and they'd know where to get it, and it would be Shangri-La.
We put bus signs up at every stop, a sign that said current, and then a schedule holder with a schedule, and those were removed by previous administration. And so we've put them back up in some cases, mostly on shelters. But we had worked with the town several years ago to get them up. And then over time, a lot of them were removed.
Well, I would hope
It's a bit of a bombshell.
Maybe we could try that again, because I think it's definitely necessary, and I think
we agree.
you certainly have the support of the select board and town to make that happen, because
Yep.
the bus is a necessary infrastructure, and I think it's a wonderful service, and I thank you for it.
Great. Well, we thank the town for their support, and signs are ready whenever. We should probably have a discussion with Peter and DPW again. But yes, we believe in them too. And every stop with a schedule made just for that stop. Here's when the bus is coming here. You can go to so many towns and just see a sign and there's no schedule attached. But we have a system where we have the schedule for that particular stop.
And then if you could, tell people how to use the app.
Yes.
Yeah, download the app. Copy.
That sounds just like a home run. It would be great.
Thank you. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. Couldn't resist. Just if I could take a couple more minutes of your time to talk about something newsworthy that we're doing in the very next couple of weeks, and that is we are rebranding the current name and concept into the Mover.
Okay.
So we have the current and the Mover right now, and we're gonna just go like this and just have the Mover.
Not going to be the mover.
Everything's going to be the Mover. So the current, just the concept is going away, but there's no company changes, there's no layoffs, there's no anything.
Yeah.
But you'll start to see spotted buses in town where you used to see current buses, and each bus has destination signs so you can tell them apart. But right next to the door where you get on, there'll be a bright placard that'll have the name, the color, and the number of the route, and whether there's a fare charged or not.
Great.
And down at the transportation center, we may have 2 or 3 buses there at a time. Initially, we may have some people that need help, and we'll be happy to do that. But at Mount Snow, we have 16 buses at a time in a very small area, and we're able to communicate which bus to get on. So it's time for us to just finish the consolidation of our 2 divisions, and we're finding out now we've got 54 buses between the 2 companies that instead of having one fleet here and one fleet there, we're moving buses around a lot more. And that's going to help us. and it's hard to put a spotted bus in a territory where
Yeah.
it's all stripes or waves and vice versa. So we're going to have them all spots, and it's going to be a two-phase program. We don't have the funds to do the whole thing, but we're going to do the Brattleboro buses first.
Okay.
And you'll see the first bus probably by the middle of February with spots. I know you've seen other buses with spots now because we've always been loaning them. But we just purchased 2 new buses for Brattleboro. They're 25-seat buses, brand new, and they're white right now with just a little decal. Those will be spotted with a Holstein design. And we thought that Brattleboro would be the first place to start because both systems meet in Brattleboro. And the rest of the territory and the other 17 or 18 buses will be done probably in the summer or fall, pending a grant, a successful grant application to VTrans, which has already signaled their support of it.
Great.
So pretty soon the drivers will be wearing black and having red on them, and you'll see more spots and less waves.
I see a sign that just is spotted that just says bus. Bus.
You don't like mover?
I like mover. I'm just talking about on the side of the road. People don't read very long, just bus.
Yeah.
Mover's too long.
Yeah. I'm kidding. You do what you want. It's your brand.
Okay.
That's just my own vision.
All right.
Mover's appropriate since we're, I assume you're making a cow pun
They're all going to be.
with the spots.
Yes.
Right, okay.
Holstein
Well,
design.
yes, well, we're the home of Holstein
Right.
International. So
That's right.
thank you for starting that with Brattleboro.
I have a non-cow related question. Actually, I suppose in some ways it is a cow related question. It's about fossil fuels.
Yeah.
And
Dinosaur.
yeah. And what is the plan for transitioning away from fossil fuels with your bus fleet?
French fry bus.
A really good question. We get asked this many, many times.
Yeah. No doubt.
You'll see large transit buses, electric buses, if I understand your question. You'll see, I think, 3 or 4 of them in Burlington. You'll see 2 in Rutland in about a year, and you'll see 2 in the White River Junction area. Those buses are about $1.3 million a piece, and they have very limited range and horsepower. And what I'm driving at is the technology for that is still being developed. Very popular item, very apropos, goes hand in hand with sustainability, et cetera. But the first bus that VTrans ran from Burlington to Montpelier, the electric bus that they ran, ended up going 30 miles an hour and got ticketed by the state police for traveling too slow. And they are putting these buses on flat roads because the ability to climb hills, especially with a full load, is still wanting a little bit. So there's a lot of talk about electric buses. There's electric buses everywhere, but they're short runs on hills and very, very, very expensive. The bus that we just bought for Brattleboro is $175,000. And I realize it burns fossil fuels for sure. But it's hard for us to come up with a 20% match of $1.3 million versus $175,000. So the battery technology is getting better. It's better than it was a few years ago, but I think it needs to be developed a little bit more before it becomes practical.
So if I hear your answer, it's when the technology is right and the price point is something we can handle.
Yes.
Then yes.
Yes.
And in the meantime, if we all took the bus, it would be more sustainable.
That's right. We're still saving fossil fuels over cars in terms of if we can fill the bus or half fill the bus, but we're also looking too at other fuels like propane. We see those in national parks now, and those are getting pricey as well. So we're hoping that electricity makes a big turnaround soon, and until that time, they're very expensive and short life and not really made for a hilly area with a lot of people on it.
I had another cow thing that I lost.
Is it a joke?
It was a joke.
Okay.
I can't bring it back. I really appreciate how much time you took to speak to riders to develop this line, and I I worked recently with a lot of people that took the bus, and the bus routes are far surpass where they were. So thank you very much,
you.
and it is noticed.
Great. Brattleboro does not hold back on their opinions, and we got lots of it,
God, no.
which is what made the thing work.
Yeah,
When they
that's true.
said that if you follow what people said,
Yep.
they will come.
That's how you get things done. You're noisy about it. Okay, well, thank you so much
Thank
for
you for
joining
your
us
time
again.
this year. We'll see you next year.
Thank you.
See you next year. Good luck with that branding.
Thank you.
What about these signs?
Yeah, who didn't this?
Bus, cow bus.
At some point,
We'll
you'll tell.
follow up.
Yeah, oh yeah, I want to know all about that. Okay. So our next item, still under new business, we will be taking a break at 8:15, and right now we are moving along to item C, which is our collective bargaining agreement with the New England Police Benevolent Association, also known as NEPA.
Actually, NEPBA.
Okay. For the period. Can't resist myself tonight. From July 1st, 2019 through June 30, 2022. Peter.
Thank you. So we talked a fair amount about this or around this earlier tonight when we were talking about non-union pay and the fact that there are 4 employee unions, 3 contracts of which got settled last summer. This is the 4th union contract, all on the same schedule for 3-year cycles, this cycle being from July 1st, 2019 to June 30, 2022. And this one actually lagged a little behind the others, really only because we got started later in the negotiations with the NEPBA. The tone of the negotiations was equally positive as it was with the other unions. In each case, it took about 2 or 3 months to negotiate the terms. This particular one, the financial terms came together in October. And so one important point related to the other business this evening is the financial impact of the implementing this contract is already reflected in the budget that staff brought to you at the beginning of this budget process back in November, because we had shaken hands on this back in October with the union. And of course, you know this, but I'll note for the record and for the public, as collective bargaining negotiations proceed, I'm checking back in with the board regularly as we're, from meeting to meeting with the union. I'm back with the board to talk about how that's evolving to make sure that what staff is negotiating with the union is something that is in line with the board's expectations and what you're going to be ultimately ready to approve. So we got to a place in October where we knew that you would be comfortable with the financial terms of the agreement. It took us a little longer than usual to get the document ready to bring to you, which we did about 10 days ago. No issues arose. It was just a more complicated set of changes this time, and the holidays were in between, and it just was a matter of working drafts back and forth between the union and the town. We got to a place, as I said, about 10 days ago, where the document was ready to bring forward for your approval. We have posted it on the website. We received good feedback from Franz earlier this year that documents of this complexity and impact would be helpful if they were out a little bit further in advance, not just on the Friday prior to the meeting. And so we made a point of making sure that happened with this document and with the document related to the non-union pay. And we'll make a practice of that going forward. So it's all ready for your approval. The union membership has already voted to approve the contract. With your approval tonight, we'll get it executed and fully implemented.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We at this table have known a lot about this and talked a lot about this. Is there anything that anybody feels like they'd like to mention at this time in the process?
No, I mean, I think it was constructive and teamwork on both sides, and super happy with the way it went.
And again, as I said before, the goal is fairness, and I think that was achieved.
And we really appreciate our police department. Not that we don't appreciate every department, because it's a town where it requires a lot of hard work on many different levels from all of our departments. So I hope that each department, as we've gone through this process, at least can feel our appreciation. Okay. Well,
I'd make a motion.
well, thank you very much.
Unless Franz has anything he wants to say.
Oh, Franz, before we're about to make a motion. Did you want to speak first?
No, thank you.
Okay. Liz?
I move to approve the collective bargaining agreement between the town of Brattleboro and the New England Police Benevolent Association for the period from July 1, 2019 through June 30th, 2022.
Excellent. Liz has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, we are moving to item D, which is our annual appointments for ratification at representative town meeting, and that is for the town clerk and town attorney. Peter?
Yes, thank you. So we're recommending this evening that both incumbents be reappointed to their positions. Take them as each as a separate independent motion to appoint Hillary Francis for another year as town clerk and the law firm of Fisher and Fisher Law Offices PC as town attorney.
Okay. Is there a discussion on either or both of these positions that are being proposed for re-election? Reappointment,
Thanks.
re-election.
Thanks for all the work that they've done.
Thanks is right.
You know.
Indeed.
They seem to be doing an excellent job.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so we're gonna take these as two separate motions, and our first motion would be for town clerk. Does anybody want to make that motion?
I'll make a motion to appoint Hillary Francis as town clerk, subject to ratification at the representative town meeting on March 21st, 2020.
Excellent.
I'm quite sure that was right, and then it is.
Then it is. Then it is, so it is. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent, motion carries, and we have our second motion. Who would like to make that motion?
I'll make it. Move to appoint Fisher and Fisher Law Offices PC as town attorneys, subject to ratification at the representative town meeting on March 21st, 2020.
Excellent. Daniel has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And that motion carries. We now move to annual contract with the town attorney. Peter?
Thank you. What we're recommending this evening is identical to the existing contract between the town and Fisher Law Offices, with the only exception of the overall total annual retainer being increased by 2% from $108,201 to $110,364. I think Bob Fisher and others on his team have continued to serve the town very well. We've had discussion on prior evenings about particular situations where we were calling upon Bob and his firm about the benefit to the town of having a retainer relationship, so that we don't have to ration our dependency on him. There are definitely months where it's a lighter load for them than what the retainer represents, but there are many months where it's a heavier load, and it's really good for the town to be able to have levelized, stabilized those legal expenses. Right now is a really good example where Bob is having to do the work outside of the courtroom. It's extensive, related to the enforcement of the health code, health order that the select board issued a couple of months back. And we've been back in court. It's been at least 3 times, and I think more than that, and still at least one more visit to go. And all of that is included, all of that litigation representation is included within the retainer fee, just like all the basic advice and weekly services that we receive. So based on all of that, I'm happy to recommend that the board approve the proposed contract for 2020-2021 with Fisher and Fisher.
Excellent. Is there further discussion from board members on this topic besides what Peter has just talked about?
No, I'll just say that it's very rare when we say, "Where's Bob?" He's always there for us, so it's a pretty valuable relationship.
Thank you, Bob. Okay, somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
I move to authorize Town Manager Peter Elwell to execute a contract with Town Attorney Bob Fisher for the provision of town attorney services for the 2020-2021 years by Fisher and Fisher Law Offices PC in the annual retainer amount of $110,000 $364.
Excellent. Liz has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. And our last item under new business is review of draft warnings for town meeting election on March 3rd, 2020, and representative town meeting on March 21, 2020.
Just a quick clarification to remind the public, it's our next to last item. It's the last one on the pre-printed agenda.
That's right.
And we will have one more after this, which is the letter to the governor regarding the retreat.
I fell trap to that already.
No problem. So what's before you does not need any action by you this evening. It will need your approval 1 week from tonight. But it is the draft warning. We actually refer to it in the plural as warnings because, as usual, there are initial articles that are for the annual town meeting election on March 3rd, and then the set of articles that are for the annual representative town meeting on March 21st. The three for the annual town meeting election are to choose the officers for the town, and those are identified, enumerated in the article, to choose the officers for the Wyndham Southeast School District, and to vote on the petitioned article regarding the potential change in the form of government to that of a mayoral form. Those three will be on the ballot. The set of offices in each of Article 1 and Article 2, and then the ballot question in Article 3 will be on a ballot for the polls for the voting that will occur on March 3rd, and the polls will be open at the American Legion next door here to the Municipal Center from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. on March 3rd. And then there are 20 some odd. There are 20 exactly articles on the representative town meeting warning for Saturday, March 21st to begin at 8:30 in the morning. And I won't go through each one of those individually. It's in a sequence similar to past years. The substance also similar to, but the dollar figures, of course, unique to the particular circumstances of this year. What is important about this moment is if any of you from your review of these materials in preparation for tonight's meeting have any questions or concerns about either of the two sets of articles, we'd ask that you bring those up so that we can get those questions resolved, so that we know that what we bring you 1 week from tonight actually to put out into the public domain on Friday for you to review in preparation for Tuesday, and then what you would be voting on 1 week from tonight. We want to make sure that it's in a form that you won't need to change again next week. And that's just important in terms of both the transparency to the public and the time frame within which these documents end up in the town report, which goes to the printer very soon.
Great, thank you for that.
I have no questions or concerns about the factual accuracy of this warning representing what we hope to do. Yes. I guess I'll leave it at that. I have some questions about town meeting a little bit, but maybe they can wait a second.
Okay.
I don't know.
Does anybody have questions or comments about these warnings, draft warnings as presented in our binders?
May I ask a question I know the answer to?
Sure. Why not?
Just for the
benefit of the public.
Get it out there, yeah. Article 3.
Mm-hmm.
Will we be standing and speaking about that?
That town meeting?
Will we be
The
standing
election
and
one?
speaking?
The one in the election?
Oh, you're talking about the top.
That's the Australian ballot.
Yeah.
Exactly. What does that mean?
That means that you show up and you cast your vote,
At the polling place.
and no one will know what vote you cast, and there will be no discussion about it.
Yep.
That is correct. The three articles for the March 3rd ballot are just that. They will be voted on that ballot on that day. The items that will be discussed and then voted by representative town meeting are the remaining 20.
Thank you for that clarification. Just wanted to put that out. It's not, apparent to everyone.
I agree with that.
Yes.
But that's the way that goes
Sure.
with those articles.
And furthermore, the process of getting an article on one of these warnings is one where you choose which warning it goes on. So it's a choice to put it as an Australian ballot, and it's a choice to put it at a representative town meeting where you might have like a 5-hour-long conversation about it. Those are choices that people make.
And just to clarify, you're not Australian, so you don't have no say.
You know, it's so funny. A lot of people in the last few weeks have said, "Are you Australian?"
Because they want to offer condolences for
Turn it off, Chris.
fires.
Whatever's going on.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Oh God, you're Australian.
Are you a Kiwi?
ballots.
No, I'm not. A town meeting rep reached out to me this week, and they were kind of curious about like. So I think last year was their first time being a town meeting rep,
Okay.
and it was a long meeting, as we know.
Sure.
And they were curious about like whether or not some of the things that end up on the warning could be dealt with elsewhere, and I'm presuming not, hence
Right.
them being
Yeah.
on the warning.
That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's actually a really good segue to something I realized as you've been having your discussion that I left out of the opening remarks. And so it's important just to note for the record that these obviously don't just appear, but they also are not just something that Jan and I throw together.
Right.
This has had extensive coordination with and approval of both Lauren Crisp as the moderator and Bob Fisher as the town attorney. Jan does the heavy lifting on it, but the four of us collaborate around it and we check as needed on the details of certain pieces with other people, Hillary especially, but sometimes others. So this is the result of a team effort. We're confident that it's accurate and proper. And one of the ways in which it's accurate and proper is, there's really no such thing as like a consent agenda for a town meeting. Right. You got to deal with each item. Each article needs to address a single topic. And so it's necessary to do this. The amount of time that the body debates any particular one is obviously something that's up to the body.
There's the rub.
Yeah.
And some of these are routinely dealt with in, just a matter of moments because they're so routine. But each one does need to be its own separate item.
And each one must be on here.
And each one must be on here. You're right. These are things that under state statute have to be done by, often in the statutes, there's one nuance to this as far as how it relates to Brattleboro. Often it's referred to as the voters of the town. But the voters of the town for Brattleboro in the town meeting, our unique representative town meeting form, there are things that go on the ballot, the offices, and that's per our charter. And then the majority of issues that under state statute have to be approved by the voters of the town are dealt with by representative town meeting at the day-long Saturday meeting.
And that was the one other thing they brought up. Does it have to be a meeting that takes place over one day?
It doesn't have to be a meeting that takes place over one day. It
Why ruin
is
2 days?
not always as long as last year. So last year was a particularly long meeting going on until I believe about 9:30 in the evening.
13.
It's pretty common that it goes till late afternoon, even to 5 or 6. It's pretty uncommon that it goes to 8 or 9. I'm aware of at least one occasion. I was not a participant at that time, but I'm aware of at least one occasion when it was going so late on the Saturday that the body decided to reconvene. I believe it was the next day. I don't know if either of you know that. It was the next day, Sunday afternoon, I think, is when the group came back together to finish the business. So that's happened at least once. My understanding is there was a fair amount of disagreement about whether that alternative is better than just persevering through and getting it done on Saturday evening because of the fact that the people haven't planned to be together on Sunday afternoon, but they had planned to be there for a long day on Saturday.
It's the New England way to plow through the pain.
It is, isn't it? It's
It really
cultural.
is. I'm not saying it's the healthiest. I'm just saying it is.
Yeah.
Franz, join in.
We do that in Australia as well.
Raise your hands.
I plow through the pain.
No, except you do it the other direction, right?
Franz Reichman, District 2 Town Meeting Representative. I think it's a little worse than what you're painting there, Peter, because I think there's been a trend towards longer meetings. It's not just one outlier. At least that's how it feels to me.
Okay.
I don't have any data to back that up.
Right.
On a perhaps more hopeful note, with the school district now no longer a separate entity that requires votes at town meeting. I mean, some years, as we may recall, the school budget took a total of 3.5 minutes.
Sure.
But that was after you guys had already beaten us to a pulp with the municipal stuff.
Yeah,
Or
I've
vice
seen
versa.
that, or vice versa.
Anyway, so yeah, I still have concerns about this, and
Yeah.
I think maybe some of this mayoral thing is driven by concerns about the length of town meeting. What I would hope is that town meeting representatives prepare themselves well,
Yeah.
perhaps by reading some reports from some town meeting committees, so that things can go smoothly. At least that's my hope.
Yeah.
That's my hope too, Franz. I like that hope.
We like that.
It's also important to remember that we at this board don't drive anything. So if the body ever decided to recess or the meeting was going too long, that wouldn't be something that came from this table when we're there. We can join in the conversation, but we're not the bosses of the applesauces on that day,
No,
unfortunately.
but we sort of guide.
How often do you say that phrase in the course of the day, Brandy?
So
Something occurred to me.
what I say in the course of my day is, I'm the boss applesauce. I try not to say that at this table. That's with the kids.
It occurred to me that in that spirit that Franz mentioned, should we do we have dates yet for informational meeting?
Oh.
We do.
That's
So
Can we?
the informational meeting, just to help people be able to recall this for themselves going forward, is always on the Wednesday evening that is 10 days prior to the town meeting. So it's Wednesday, March 11th this
Okay.
year, 10 days prior to the March
Okay.
21st town meeting.
good to know
And
that.
it
It's
will
10 days prior to town meeting, which is the third Saturday after the first Tuesday. So that really, I don't understand why
Thanks,
people
Tim.
don't always know when the date is.
Right.
Wow.
But if you back time from the town meeting date,
Yes.
you can always go to 10 days earlier on a Wednesday. That's when we'll be at Academy School having the information meeting.
Yeah.
Which reminds me to also point out, unfortunately, this year we're going back to the multi-purpose room at BAMS for the town meeting. There was a snafu with the scheduling of the BUHS gym. We'll get way out ahead of that next year. We'll go back to the BUHS gym for 2021. But the 2020 representative town meeting will be in the multi-purpose room at BAMS.
That's not going to put us back on the stage, is it? Because that was a real.
It is not going to put us back on the stage. We
Okay.
are going to go up there and look at the site again and see if we can set it up. The way that we set it up the year we were not on the stage was problematic for BCTV and a concern to some of
Yeah.
the participants in the meeting. And so we're going to go up and see if we can
Okay.
work with the room to be a better layout. But I don't know exactly how it'll be laid out for this meeting. We will go back to the BUHS gym for the following year.
Okay.
Very high chairs, perhaps, for the board. I'm quite sure.
Let me just ask, so that's March 21st for town meeting and March 11th for informational?
That is
town?
correct.
And election day is the 3rd.
That's correct.
And there's only one informational meeting because there's no school.
That's exactly right. March 11th will be the only information meeting this year.
Okay.
And so, wait a second.
Well,
So
we gotta recess at 8:15 specifically.
I say 12. So this Article 3 about fundamentally changing the form of governance. How are people going to make a decision about that? Is it our job to be involved in that work?
How do we know? We don't know anything about it.
Well, we could speak freely,
Yes.
of course. But I
Of
don't see
our-
it as
of
my
our
job
opinions.
to explain anyone's intent, which I feel is quite unclear.
Agreed.
And it's advisory.
What does advisory mean, Peter?
Advisory means that the outcome of the vote will provide guidance to the select board, but not direct the select board to take any particular action.
Thanks for that
It
clarification.
will provide guidance or not, depending on your perspective. Because in my opinion, you still don't really have guidance once you have a yes or a no.
Maybe it's
I
guidance
hear
to
what you're saying.
research it.
Yes, I hear what you're saying. The question, even if you answered it yes or no, you still don't know
What does
what
it
it
mean?
means. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Fair.
So at this time,
I don't want to sound dismissive. I just feel it's not wonderful wording.
Yep. I hear you.
At this time, we are going to take a
Can I make,
recess.
I'm sorry, Brandy, can I make one comment?
Yes.
We think there's going to be a change on the March 3rd ballot. We think this, Article number 2 is going to be removed.
Article number 2, to choose
Yes,
all
we got
Wyndham
we
Southeast.
got a very late email this afternoon.
Okay.
And I forwarded that to Lauren and to Bob.
Okay.
To see, but the school is
Okay.
going to have their own separate ballot and not part of, warning and not part of our warning.
I guess that makes
Would it be
sense
on the
as
same
things
day
are
still?
going.
It'd be on the same day still.
No, well, the school annual meeting is the Tuesday, March 17, before representative town meetings. The school is no longer the town school board, it's now the town school district, and they are sort of operating separately this year.
Huh.
Okay, thank
What
you
do
for
you
that,
know?
Jan.
Yeah, thanks.
And
That's
we'll have
important.
that explicitly buttoned down in time for the warning that will be in front of you for an actual
Yes, we'll
approval
probably
next
know
week.
tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much for that. That's late breaking, it's important news. So at this point, we are going to take a recess. I will see everybody back here in 10 minutes.
If you have one item left, we
Are you sure?
plow through. It's silly lips. Plow through.
That was not directed to you. You know how to plow.
Just like Australia.
Jesus.
Just
Okay,
like
well,
Australia.
where are we, Peter? What are we
So
looking at?
you have one remaining item. It is the one that got added to tonight's agenda. And if you'll indulge me, I think it would be proper, since it's unusual for us to add something, that even though I
Yes.
read this in its entirety at the beginning of the meeting, since you're about to consider it and act upon it, I'd like to read it in its entirety again for those who may be still watching. If that's okay with the board.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Thank you.
It's a letter from the Brattleboro Select Board to the Honorable Philip B. Scott, Governor of Vermont. Dear Governor Scott, thank you for announcing in your State of the State address that the Brattleboro retreat, quote, is simply too critical for us to let fail, end quote, and that its closure, quote, would have a devastating impact on our mental health system and the region's economy, end quote. We completely agree. We are writing today in favor of a more robust state partnership with the retreat. This is an issue of central importance to our constituents in Brattleboro, to our neighbors throughout Windham County and Vermont, who depend on the retreat for jobs and commerce, and most importantly, to the individuals and families who depend on the retreat to preserve and improve their very lives. The retreat has been an important institution in our community for almost 200 years. In the 21st century, the retreat has become an important institution for the whole state of Vermont. Partnering with other healthcare providers, social service agencies, law enforcement, and others, the retreat leverages its particular expertise in some of the most challenging aspects of our collective efforts to address mental illness and drug addiction. The retreat provides essential services to Vermonters suffering such acute mental health issues that many other hospitals turn them away. We are counting on you, your administration, the legislature, and the retreat's leadership to agree on a financial plan so that these essential services continue to be available, and so that this major employer continues to be an important economic driver for our region.
Thank you again for reading that letter. Are there questions or comments on this letter from the board before we take a vote?
No.
Okay. Then I would entertain a motion.
I will make a motion to approve this letter as just read by Peter to Governor Scott, dated January 22nd, 2020.
Excellent. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
One last reminder, if you plan to be submitted to be a candidate, to be on the ballot, your deadline is Monday, January 27th by 5 p.m. into Hillary or members of the staff at the town clerk's office downstairs in the municipal building. At this time, I would entertain.
This chair could be yours.
This chair could be yours for the mere price of doing that on time.
Go to the watch. There you go.
I would entertain at this time a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourns at 8:20. Thank you.
Record time.
Not bad, not
It's been a
bad.
while.
Until next week. I'm gonna know what hit us.
Now then, I I'm gonna text my wife to let her know that I need picking up.
You did that.